If you were to ask people what poetry is, just walk down the street and ask people what poetry is, probably they would find it synonymous with love poetry. Love poetry, kind of the most pervasive type of poetry. And in love poetry, oftentimes what we're doing is we're picking a thing to stand in as a metaphor for the beloved. Love poetry metaphors. The most famous one, probably the rose, the most romantic of flowers. This rose is my baby, oh joy, because it's beautiful and it's kind of prickly when you grab it wrong. And it doesn't smell the greatest. Roses don't smell the greatest, but it's a flower. You can look at it, and when it's cold, the rose is cold. That's the rose, okay? That's the metaphor of the rose. But the sun. The sun is a great metaphor for the beloved. It brings light to my life. It is the warmth that I need. In the nighttime, it goes away. That is the metaphor of the sun for the beloved. What about birds? Birds often stand in as metaphors for the beloved. The bird is without chains. The bird has the beautiful song. The bird is so nice to look at in the trees. The bird is kind of a jerk and won't shut up, right? All of these things, but they're very romantic types of metaphors. But today, we have the most romantic of metaphors for the beloved. There's the bird, right? There's the sun. There's the rose and a flea. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the Poetry Discussion playlist, now approaching 700 poetry discussions long. Number 2, the John Donne playlist here on the channel. And number 3 being, of course, 30 must-read poems. Now, these 30 must-read poem videos have 3 different sections. Number 1, they have a quick bio over the poet. Number 2, they have a quick excerpt on what type of poetry that poet is known for writing. And finally, an analysis of the poem. And so we have to ask ourselves this: who was John Donne? John Donne was born in either 1571 or 1572 in London, England. For reference, 1572 was the year of St. Bartholomew Day's massacre. It was also the year that Tupac died, the Incan Tupac Amaru, which is lots of death. But it was also the year that Raphael Bombelli defined imaginary numbers, which, if you're watching a video about John Donne on the internet, probably means it was also the year that your dreams of being a mathematician were also killed a few hundred years later while you snuck those last few peanut butter M&Ms in the middle of your 7th grade math class. He was the 3rd of 6 children born to a father also named John Donne, who was an iron worker, and a mother named Elizabeth Haywood. His father died when the poet was just 4 years old, leaving Elizabeth to marry another John Simmonges, himself a widower. At 14, he began his education at the University of Cambridge, but after 3 years of study, his degree was declined because he refused to take the oath of supremacy because he was a Catholic. But he was accepted to Thavies Inn, a legal school. In 1593, his brother, who was in prison because he harbored a Catholic priest, died of bubonic plague, which affected John Donne greatly. In 1601, Donne married a woman named Anne More against the wishes of More's powerful uncle. It was a move that briefly landed Donne in prison. It also derailed Donne's career prospects. Eventually, Donne drummed up a living as a lawyer And then Donne got to the real work. Children. From 1601 till his final child was born in 1617, his wife Anne would have 12 children. 2 would be stillbirths, and 3 more would die very young. In 1602, Donne was elected as an unpaid member of Parliament. In 1610, Donne would begin a productive run as a writer. Ignatius, his conclave, Pseudo-Martyr, An Anatomy of the World, and Of the Progress of the Soul were all published in short order. In 1615, Donne became a priest in the Church of England, and he was awarded a doctorate degree from Cambridge. He also became a royal chaplain, but in 1617 his wife Anne would die. This loss, on top of losing 5 children, was nearly too much for John Donne. The next year he would become ambassador to the Princess of Germany, where he would live for the next 2 years. In 1623, Donne fell ill with what may have been typhus, and his work during this time eventually became devotions upon emergent occasions. But as well remembered as he is in English classrooms, he is perhaps better remembered in pews, as 160 of his sermons survive. In early 1631, John Donne's health took a turn for the worse, and on March 31st, 1631, after a life of literature, religion, many children, and mourning his own loved ones, and while he was working as Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, John Donne died of what is now believed to have been stomach cancer. John Donne is often known as a metaphysical poet. So what is metaphysical poetry? Well, we get this from poemanalysis.com. Metaphysical poetry is known for its unique style, which often breaks away from the more structured and formal poetry of its time. Here are some of the most defining and common characteristics. Spoken quality. These poems have a conversational tone, making them feel more personal and direct. This was quite different from the highly formal poetry that many poets of the time favored. Colloquial diction. The use of everyday language helps convey complex ideas in a relatable way. Philosophical exploration. Poets often tackle big questions such as, does God exist? What is the ultimate nature of reality? Do humans have free will? Metaphysical conceits. These are elaborate, often surprising comparisons between very different things, like love and religion, or physical and spiritual experiences. Use of paradoxes and contradictions. Metaphysical poetry frequently presents ideas that challenge the reader's understanding, creating tension between seemingly opposite conceits. Irony and puns. The poets often used wit to engage the reader, playing with words and ideas to reveal deeper meanings. Strange metaphors and hyperbole. Unusual and exaggerated imagery is common, often pushing boundaries to make readers think beyond the obvious. Relaxed meter. The poems generally don't follow a strict rhythm, giving them a more natural conversational flow. Mark but this flea, and mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our 2 bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with 1 blood made of 2. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare. where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed, and marriage temple is, though parents grudge and you who aren't met, and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though yous make you apt to kill me. Let not that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphest, and sayest that thou find'st not thyself, nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yield'st to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. So let's start this by breaking down exactly what it is that we're looking at in these lines. Mark but this flea, and mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our 2 bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said, a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead, yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with 1 blood made of 2, and this, alas, is more than we would do. What are we saying here? The speaker is saying, hey, I want the hubba hubba. Hubba hubba. Not that big a deal. It's really not all that big a deal. See, this flea here, it bit me, then it bit you, and in that flea, our bloods are together, and that's not a sin. We wouldn't even do that much. We wouldn't mingle blood this way. We would just bounce off each other for a couple minutes. Oh, stay 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed, our and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge, and you, we are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though use make you apt to kill me. Let not to that self-murder be, and sacrilege 3 sins in killing 3. In this flea, we're basically married, you and I. And this flea is a marriage bed, is a marriage temple. This flea right here, right? This represents all of us. The 2 of us, you and me, baby, we have been married in this flea. This is our marriage bed. No matter what your parents think. Screw your parents. No one cares about your parents. And maybe you want to kill this flea now, and thereby kill me, but don't do that because it kills you too. You would be killing the self. There's sin in that, don't you know? Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Where could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and sayest that thou find'st not thyself, nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yield'st to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. Here we're saying, okay, that's fine. You killed the flea, crushed it. That's fine. What did he ever do so wrong? Except, that he bit you. That's fine. But it has degraded neither of us. You say it's degraded neither of us, and I agree. It has degraded neither of us. So look, you were afraid to hubba bubba, to hubba hubba. Don't you see how silly fear is? Now, I think the most charming part of this poem, and you can make the whole baby it's cold outside argument for this poem if you want. Go ahead, knock yourself out. I've had to read too many of those books when I was in college. The most charming part of this poem, so the conceit here, the genius conceit of this poem is saying, this flea bit me and it bit you, and our bloods are mingled therein. That's more than we would do. That's being married kind of right there, right? We have that going for us. That's the conceit of the poem. But the brilliant sort of arrogant and charming, I say charming, part of this poem is the speaker starts this poem making that conceit. Look, you're afraid to have the hubba hubba with me. And I get it, right? I understand that. You're afraid of that. But look at this flea. This flea has done more than we would do, right? Our hubba hubba wouldn't be so much as this flea. Is that flea a sin or a sinner? No, it's just a flea. How could what we do be a sin, be sinful? Goes from that to, in the very end of this poem, saying, oh, yeah, you killed the flea, huh? That's cool. But look, do you see how silly fears are? Killing the flea like that, do you see how silly it is to be afraid? How false fears be? There's nothing to be afraid of. So then he just takes a step back in his argument from drilling down into saying, hey, that flea has done more serious business than we would be doing, to taking a step back and saying, oh, well, do you see how silly fears are, right? There's no reason to be afraid. I think that is sort of the ultimate genius of this poem because it's slipped in so seamlessly at the end. But let's talk about love poetry, should we? This is sort of acclaimed, I guess I should say, as one of the greater love poems of all time because of the wit herein, because of the wordplay herein, because of the subtle psychological gestures herein. Okay, great, but what is it that love poetry does? Pretty often, what love poetry does is it takes the beloved and it puts them on a pedestal. Baby, you're so fine that you should never touch the ground. Baby, you're so beautiful. People can't look directly at you. Kind of like the sun. Baby, you sound so good that every time you leave, I want to pluck my eardrums out so that I don't have to hear the rest of the world in the meantime. Baby, you smell so good. Okay, I can't think of anything for smell, but you get what I'm saying. What we're doing here is really the opposite. So we had the other day one of the Dark Lady poems in this series. Is it Sonnet 130, I believe? And the whole discussion around that sonnet seems to be, oh, well, what Shakespeare's doing here is turning the sonnet on its head. I don't think it is. I think what Shakespeare's doing there is reaching for some different metaphor. This poem, however, this poem is turning love poetry on its head. Because instead of putting the beloved on a pedestal, it's saying, hey, We're both flea-bitten dirtbags. And who cares what your parents say? Okay? Screw your parents. Your parents are dum-dums anyway. They don't care about us. What do your parents care about us? We're better than that. Even if we're sitting here getting eaten up by fleas, baby. It is taking love and sex down to the nitty-gritty, down to the dirty, down to the bugs. That's where we find ourselves in this poem. But not any bug, by the way, because we're going somewhere here. Not any bug. The flea. Gross, sure. But fleas, the flea's business is blood. That's what the flea does. If these two people, our speaker and the beloved, if these two people have a child, what do we say about them? That child has both their blood. You have your father's blood, you have your mother's blood. This this flea becomes these two, the child of these two. Becomes their child. This flea becomes their child because both of the blood is mingled therein. And then the beloved kills it, squashes it out, snuffs it out in the prime of its blood-sucking life. The beloved kills it. This is such a referendum on love poetry that even I guess that's the middle, kind of. It's the beginning of the third stanza. The beginning of the end of the beginning. The end of the beginning of the end. However you want to see it. This is such an anti-love poem that even the future of these individuals is no longer in question. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do on this channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.